Hey guys, what is up? It is the Fast Break Report here, bringing you guys another vlog. So I wanted to talk about some teams that are definitely going to be making deals around the NBA trade deadline and maybe around some specific players. Just because I saw a video from Kenny For Real, Kenny Beecham, that said the NBA trade deadline is going to be pretty mid, and I don't think that's the case at all. Actually, I think there's going to be some surprise names moved around the NBA trade deadline, and there's also going to be some teams that we knew they were going to make a move. So, one guy, or not even one guy, I guess. Do we want to start off this way? Yeah. One guy that's drawing a lot of interest is John Collins, of the Atlanta Hawks. Surprisingly enough, the Indiana Pacers aren't the top suitors for John Collins. I know that may surprise people, but the teams that have been most engaged with trade talks for John Collins have been the Washington Wizards and the Utah Jazz. And if that's the case, the Wizards are going to have to give up Porzingis to get John Collins, which I don't think the Hawks are going to do. The Utah Jazz, on the other hand, to get John Collins, would have to give up Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt for John Collins. Now, that would be a nice haul, I think, for the Atlanta Hawks, considering they need defense, and Malik Beasley has been one of the best bench scorers in the NBA this year. If it weren't for Benedict Mathurin and Malik Monk, he would easily be number one in Sixth Man of the Year voting right now. So, yeah, I like the deal for Atlanta. Makes a lot of sense in that aspect. Does it make a lot of sense for Utah? Maybe. You get to put John Collins in a situation he wants to be in where he's the number one or number two option on that team. So, you know what? It makes a little bit of sense for both teams. But is John Collins really that good to be a number one or number two option? I don't know, but I guess we'll find out. It seems like the Atlanta Hawks are ready to move on from him, and we already knew he was not happy with the Atlanta Hawks to start with. So, yeah, he's a guy I expect to get moved. Speaking of the Utah Jazz, Jordan Clarkson and Mike Conley Jr. are two guys they're definitely going to be fielding calls on. Jordan Clarkson not being willing to sign a contract extension with the Jazz should tell you all you need to know about that. Jordan Clarkson's getting fucking moved. I don't know what for, but he's definitely getting moved. I didn't expect him to re-sign with that team, but he's a guy that is definitely going to be on the move, I think, at the deadline. Jordan Clarkson's also a nice six-man candidate for literally any team in the NBA. So, yeah, he's a guy that's going to draw some interest. He could warrant a first-round pick to the right team, or maybe another decent young player. I don't know who, but he's a guy that they could definitely get something for. Mike Conley's a guy that the Timberwolves have expressed interest in. Surprisingly enough, I was the one who said that. Remember when I made my first trade deadline video where I was like, oh, the Timberwolves could use him? Well, they're expressing interest in him because D'Angelo Russell's on an expiring deal, and they have to get something for D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell is another guy that I think is definitely getting moved at the deadline. Maybe not he's going to be a last-minute move. I'm telling you right now, D'Angelo Russell is going to be a last-minute move at the deadline, the day of the deadline, maybe an hour before the deadline closes, because they can't get nothing for him. He's not going to sign back there. I just don't see it happening. And the Minnesota Timberwolves have to get something for him. He's got $31.3 million left on his deal, and there are teams out there that are looking for point guards, man. I know the Suns are looking for a guy because they've been monitoring the Fred VanVleet situation, and the Orlando Magic are also looking. So there are two teams that can make a push for D'Angelo Russell. So there's a market out there for D'Angelo Russell somewhere. They just got to find it. Another guy that could get moved here is, I guess we're getting into more of the tanking teams here, is the Houston Rockets with Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon is shooting 34% from three this year, 42% from the field, and 80% from the free throw line. He's not what he used to be. They're asking for a good young player or a first-round pick for him. They're more likely to get the good young player than they are to get the first-round pick. Eric Gordon's good, but he's not what he used to be. If he's shooting 34% from three, there's not a whole lot there to be desired. So, I don't know, man. He's getting older, and it seems like he's losing a step already. So, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but Houston's going to be looking to get rid of him. One team that is very obviously a seller at the trade deadline is going to be the Charlotte Hornets. They're going to be looking to get rid of everybody that's not named LaMelo Ball or PJ Washington Jr., I think. Kelly Oubre, Jalen McDaniels, Mason Plumlee, Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier, all guys that are going to get trade interest. Terry Rozier is a guy they'd really like to get off of, and I even think Gordon Hayward's a guy they would like to get off of. Gordon Hayward's one of those guys that I really wish the Pacers could get, but he's injury prone all the time. He has an insane contract, like one of the worst contract signings ever. He's one of those guys that the Charlotte Hornets just signed because they could get him, and he's been injured more often than not throughout his entire career. Great guy when he plays, like really great player when he actually plays, but doesn't play defense that well, and he's injured a lot. So if the Pacers could get him on a reasonable deal, I wouldn't be against it, but he's just one of the guys. He also doesn't fit the Pacers timeline very well, but he's a guy that I could see getting moved. Next is the San Antonio Spurs. They're going to be looking to get rid of Jakob Poeltl, who the Celtics and the Raptors have interest in. And Josh Richardson and Doug McDermott are two guys that are going to be fielding a lot of calls as well. The Spurs are obvious sellers at this point at the deadline. They're one of the worst teams in the NBA. They're in the Wemby sweepstakes at this point. So it really depends on, what they're looking for these guys. But they're both really good players, so who knows what they could get. But Josh Richardson's a nice piece. He plays defense as well. It's not elite defense by any means, but it's solid defense to say the least. And Doug McDermott is just an absolute sniper from three at this point. I mean, dude's just been killing it from three all year. So Doug McDermott's a nice signing. Another team here that's maybe a little bit of a hot take here is the Toronto Raptors. A lot of teams are monitoring if whether or not they're going to be sellers at the deadline, and I kind of think they will be. The only guy on their team that I think is going to be untouchable is Scotty Barnes. Fred VanVleet has a player option this year. OG Anunoby has a player option this year. Gary Trent Jr. is a good shooter. Pascal Siakam's got 2 years left on his deal, but he's a really, really good player. All NBA third player if we're making an argument case here. He's playing very well, and he could warrant a nice haul. So I don't know, man. I think Toronto blows it up at this point. They're 20-25. They've really always been one piece away from being like a decent playoff team or a contender, but the East is so good now at this point that I feel like their championship window is officially closed. Same thing with Chicago. Their championship window, I think, is closed. Miami's in the conversation unless they can trade for a D'Angelo Russell or a Fred VanVleet type of player, which I don't know why, but I really love the idea of Fred VanVleet going to Toronto, from Toronto to Miami. I think he would be a great player for the Miami Heat to get, but I don't think they have enough to actually get him. So I don't know, man. You know what? We'll have to wait and see. But the Raptors are an interesting situation because the next couple weeks here are really going to determine if whether or not they're sellers or they go all in. I don't know what an all in move for them looks like, but they're a team that's really like one piece away from contending, but also a team that's like, are they ever going to get that piece? You know what I'm saying? Because Kawhi didn't even want to stay there after he won, so I don't know. Another guy that this is going to be, I think, a little bit of a hot take, but one guy that I could definitely see getting moved at the trade deadline is John Wall. John Wall has played very well for the Clippers this year, but he's old at this point. Like I can't say he's old, but he's older, and he's proved that he can still play at an elite level. And the Clippers are really looking for a backup center to Ivica Zubac, and Moses Brown just hasn't been that. Like he's a good player, but he's not like he's not as skilled as people think. And one guy that I could really see the Clippers trading for, just sending John Wall to like the Pelicans for Jackson Hayes or somebody like that. Like he's like John Wall's on a minimal deal, so like trading John Wall to the Pelicans helps both teams because right now they have CJ McCollum playing point for them, and on top of it, it's like Dyson Daniels has been getting some burn at point guard, but adding John Wall to that team would add a nice slasher. Maybe they're looking for more of a shooter. I don't know what they're really going to get for John Wall, or really what the Pelicans are going to get for a guy like Jackson Hayes, but John Wall's a guy I could see getting moved. I don't know, maybe they trade John Wall to the Spurs for Jakob Poeltl. I don't know. I know there's a lot of possibilities there, but John Wall's a guy that I think is a very underrated name that I think is going to get traded just because of his age. And the idea that like his value's probably never been higher in the past couple of years than it is now. So I have a feeling the Clippers are going to be looking to strike while the iron's hot, and then Reggie Jackson's probably a guy that they're going to try to re-sign. So I don't know, man. We'll have to wait and see on that. But that's pretty much it, I think. Kyle Kuzma's a guy that'll probably get moved. The Wizards will get a nice haul for Kyle Kuzma. It won't be amazing, but like they'll get something for him. Kristaps Porzingis is a guy who's been playing very well. Maybe the Wizards try to move off of him because he's very injury prone. But these are the guys that I think are most likely to get moved at the trade deadline. Jakob Poeltl's a guy that's probably going to get moved. Josh Richardson, Doug McDermott, D'Angelo Russell, John Wall, John Collins, Kyle Kuzma. There's going to be guys that definitely get moved. And there's probably even going to be guys that surprise you. Fred VanVleet's a guy that could very likely get moved at the deadline. A lot of people don't want to talk about that because it's oh, well, the Raptors are still a decent team. They are, but they're 20-25. And their hopes of contending for anything rely on if people are willing to sign there at this point. And I feel like Scottie Barnes is just so far away from being the player they need him to be that keeping these guys just doesn't really make much sense. And the idea that the Orlando Magic and the Phoenix Suns are monitoring Fred VanVleet's free agency very closely leads me to believe that maybe the Orlando Magic offer a guy like Cole Anthony and a first-round pick and Jonathan Isaac or something like that to get Fred VanVleet. I don't know. I don't know what a Fred VanVleet trade looks like at the moment. But he's a guy that, could really warrant a nice package from the right team. And same thing with Siakam. The Toronto Raptors, honestly, if they folded their hand, they would come out with a lot of assets on the other side. Just saying that. They have a lot of really talented players. Gary Trent Jr. could warrant a first-round pick. Same thing with OG Anunoby. And OG Anunoby could warrant a first-round pick unprotected. He's that good. He's one of the most underrated defenders in the league. He's just an underrated player overall. And I would love for the Pacers to get OG Anunoby. Mostly because he fits their timeline a lot better than a guy like DeMar DeRozan or something like that. Or a Zach LaVine, but the Pacers need help on the defensive side of the ball, and OG Anunoby does that. One guy that I'll just throw this out there for Pacers fans. I'm at the point now where Miles Turner is more likely to be traded than Buddy Hield. And the reason I say that is because Miles has been sitting out a couple games now, which is really weird. First it was back spasms. Now it's he's just playing every other game, it seems. Tyrese Halliburton's out for a couple weeks with an ankle injury, which I feel like honestly puts us maybe back in the tanking conversation now that he's hurt. Only because Miles Turner is I hate to bring this up, but Miles Turner is a 17-8 guy now, with Tyrese Halliburton on the floor. I really worry that people are so worried about Miles Turner going someplace else that I just worry that how do we know Miles Turner could get traded, go to another team, and be the 13-7 guy again? You know what I'm saying? There's nothing that says that couldn't happen. And Tyrese Halliburton is so good that he can make a turd look good. He can make a turd look like an all-star player. So I kind of feel like Miles Turner's ascension this year has been contributed a lot to Tyrese Halliburton. And I just feel like Miles Turner is not a guy we should overpay just because he's playing with Tyrese Halliburton. Especially when I think maybe there's better options out there, specifically for us. So I don't know, man. We'll have to wait and see. But right now it seems way more likely that Miles Turner is going to get traded than Buddy Hield. So I don't know, man. We'll have to wait and see. But tell me what you guys think about this down below in the comment section below. Helps me out. Subscribe if you guys want to see more on the Fast Break Report. And I'm out of this motherfucker. Peace, guys.